Good morning, everyone. What I'm going to try and do in this session is very quickly try and pull together some of the key facts and figures that some of the previous speakers have given you, and then try and bring it to a boil in terms of the so what for Dublin and the so what for your businesses, and talk then a little bit about some of the supports that are available. So again, just to recap, I think the bottom line here is when we talk about Brexit, for all the commentary, across various media, etc., the reality here is it is a fog, by and large. We are nowhere near a negotiated solution, and by implication, we are nowhere near knowing the full implication for the Irish economy. But the one thing that is certain, I think, over the last number of months is the fog is lifted in certain regards. It's very clear at this point in time that, as Niall alluded to, we have a problem in terms of currency. We have a problem in terms of value for money. That's very real in terms of GB consumer perception. It's equally real in terms of the Northern Ireland consumer. And from our perspective, that is something that we have to deal with in the here and now. So if we just took it forward, again, the issue that we're going to try and address over the next number of months is we're going to deal with the knowns. And I think Neil has been very eloquent in terms of talking to a range of those issues out here in terms of the unknowns. And these things will play out, and the program that we put in front of you will continue to evolve and adapt as we get new information that allows us to sharpen up the response from an Ireland Inc. perspective. But the things that we are going to focus on are the knowns. We know that GB business is down 6% year to date. And I think we're far enough into the year now to kind of predict that that's the trend. So that's a significant hit around the country, and it's a significant hit across all sectors. We know that that has been masked in the short term by a really, really strong performance out of the North American marketplace in particular. We know that we have a competitiveness issue, and I'll show you some numbers just to highlight that. And that's a double whammy. We're more expensive for the British or Northern Ireland visitor to come here, but it also means that we're more expensive when we're competing for the North American marketplace relative to our British counterparts. And again, as we try and look for growth in America, that is something we've got to be focused on. And as I say, as we go around the country, we have a particular problem when we talk to some of our clients in the border counties. For them, it's the double whammy, and it's impacting all facets of their business. Weddings moving back north of the border, GB business and NI business disappearing, etc. So that's what we've got to get focused on. And in terms of trying to, I suppose, bring all of this to a boil from a Dublin perspective, so we're down 6% in terms of GB, masked by growth from all of our other markets, generally longer stay, generally higher spending. And that's masked, as I say, that loss of volume out of Britain. If we look at Dublin, Dublin is, I suppose, in a nice position relative to the rest of the country. It benefits massively from the strength of Dublin Airport. 65% of all overseas visitors spend at least one night in Dublin. Okay? 15% of domestic consumers are active in the Dublin marketplace because you've got pieces of plant like Croke Park, you've got the Tree Arena, etc., which are drawing in the domestic audience all the while. So from a diversification perspective, actually, Dublin is in a reasonably good place versus other parts of the country. But Britain is still a quarter of the visitors, and particularly important in terms of, I suppose, the spread across the season relative to other markets. So how does that play out from a bed occupancy perspective? Actually, right across the country, not a bad place to be this year. Generally speaking, most sectors, most people are seeing growth. And in Dublin, occupancy is in a very good place. But US, historically, despite the growth, we know historically it's a volatile market. Okay, it only takes a political stunt, a terror incident, or an economic hiccup there, and America can go off the boil very quickly. So from our perspective, I think the challenge to you in Dublin would be, A, not to be complacent, B, to get focused on value for money, as Niall talked about earlier, because from a volume perspective, GB is important. And that's what we want to try and talk about, I suppose, as we address the business supports. For you, the choice is simple. What is it you can do to retain that GB business? What is it you can do to diversify? As Niall alluded to earlier, the issue of diversification is not a new one. And all the Brexit thing serves to do is underscore the need to diversify. We have too much business. I mean, essentially about 48% of all visitors to this country, out-of-state visits to this country, are GB or Northern Ireland. So collectively, I suppose we have an overexposure to Britain, and something needed to be happening there any which way. This really serves to underscore the need to do something. So just very quickly, impact of sterling. So again, if we just track it, the reality is since the announcement of Brexit, the general trend in terms of sterling is, we've lost value. How that impacts in terms of accommodation costs, basically, if we strip out all the inflation that comes about by virtue of capacity pinch here in Dublin, you're still seeing that over the April to August period of this year, the average room is 7% more expensive. Now factor in on top of that the capacity pinch, then obviously in real terms the consumer has seen a far higher inflation than 7%. And that's coming home to roost in terms of the visitor attitude survey. For the first 2 quarters of this year, we're seeing a significant decline in the consumer's rating of Ireland in terms of value for money. And again, Niall alluded to this in his presentation. There's something going on here because the British are still travelling. So GB outbound into Europe is up 4%, but into Ireland down 6%. So, I think Niall has given some reasons why we think that's happening. There's no doubt that for the GB consumer that they're a little more hard-pressed and a little more anxious. They're taking their main summer holiday and they want sun, and that's bringing in Europe. We're competing for short breaks. We're competing with a lot of domestic GB destinations, Wales, Scotland, Lake District. One of those challenges I think we have is to be more different. Why am I going to get on a plane or a boat if I don't think we're different enough? So I think we have challenges on the island here in terms of being more different and more appealing to the British visitor, and in terms of our value for money to the British visitor. And from our perspective, just tracking the numbers, we try to shade the areas that we think are most exposed. There's in that shaded area there's about a billion sterling to be fought for. That's the overseas revenue from GB marketplace or NI marketplace in those shaded areas. So it's worth fighting for. So the response from our perspective, just based on chatting to clients, I suppose the first thing we've done is we've listened very carefully in terms of the issues that are impacting businesses, and there are nuances there between border counties, Dublin, and further afield. We've had conversations around what the appropriate response needs to be, and again, that needs to be flexed by sector, and it needs to be flexed by size of company. And last but not least, we've had a clear conversation with business about the kinds of impacts we want to bring about by virtue of the supports we might bring to the table. And all of that needs to be brought together, I suppose, with a program that I suppose has 3 key criteria. It needs to be holistic. So if we're to address some of those issues around value for money, some of those issues about diversifying into other markets, and some of those issues about being more different to other GB short break destinations, etc., we need to come up with a response that touches on product, touches on service, touches on sales, marketing. And so from our perspective, we've got to make sure that we flex every arm of our organisation and partner with Tourism Ireland to bring you a support package that allows you to flex all of those things. It needs to be adaptable because we know here that, in a sense, we're dealing with something which is moving all the while. And so as we get moments of clarity, we'll come through with the next wave of activity that sharpens and sharpens as we get more detail. And last but not least, it needs to be scalable. So if I go back to that shaded map we looked at, we're going to hit about 1,000 businesses between now and the end of the year. But clearly from our perspective, we will work with anybody who wants to address this issue, and we can ramp up right across the country as we head into 2018. In terms of the response, again, you've seen the slide, so I'm not going to labor it. There are 3 key areas we want to address. So GB and NI market retention. As I say, at 47%, 48% of out-of-state visits, we cannot ignore it. We cannot throw in the towel on this marketplace. We want to talk about market diversification. And we've got to address this issue of competitiveness in the short term. And so that whole issue around running a lean business and making sure that we are getting our revenue management right as we flex pricing across different types of business and different markets, to make sure that we remain competitive for GB is important. And all of that comes out in the wash then in terms of capability to the level of the firm. So we have a suite of supports that will address everything from frontline staff, who are that touch point for the visitor in terms of quality of service, making sure that from a value for money perspective, we're worth it. Making sure that in terms of our practices on the ground that we're running a lean operation, so supervisory management and getting sharp in that space, and working all the way through in terms of sales and marketing management, right up to executive management programs. If we want to make significant decisions about diversifying into markets like China, which have significant implications for your business around the shaping of your offering, and it's a long-term play in terms of cracking those markets, et cetera, then we've got to have supports to help businesses make some of those key decisions. So we're going to address that then with a number of, strands of activity. So the first one is a range of capability development programs. Then we're going to have a number of web-based supports, and I'll talk a little bit about those. We're going to have a range of business development initiatives, which our own business development team, in conjunction with our colleagues in Tourism Ireland, will help you with. And we have the whole area of marketing communications. Niall has talked to some length about what we can do overseas, but we're also going to talk a little bit about what we can do domestically. And my colleague Keeley Fagan will talk a little bit in the end then just about the Dublin campaign, which we're going to run in the next while. So very quickly, just on the capability development space, there are 6 broad strands of activity in here, and I'm not going to labor each and every one of them. Just to say, on your desks, you have a little brochure here which gives you a little bit of a flavour on those, and afterwards, our colleagues, etc., out back will chat to you about any program that you want to delve into in more detail. But essentially, we have something in here in terms of executive level supports, a range of management development supports for middle management. We have a revenue management suite. We have specific supports in place for the attraction sector. We have a couple of different levels of support for sales, so sales managers and sales directors. And again, for smaller businesses, we have a suite of supports to help them, sharpen their business operations as they gear up around the issue of competitiveness. So a broad range, and as I say, our commitment there is we will all the time have the finger on the pulse, and we'll adapt and flex as we need to as we go on. So just to draw out a couple of them, from our perspective, we will deliver some supports directly, Fáilte Ireland bespoke supports. There are others which we have worked up in partnership with key external parties. So the Executive Development Programme we're running in conjunction with IMI. It's designed, for sales directors and general managers, so key decision makers in a business who need to make, investment decisions about where they're going to take the business over time. It's taking you into a program that ultimately leads you to develop an international business development plan. Then we are working with Cornell on the whole area of revenue management. And then if we go to some of our own internal supports, we have an international sales development program which we're running at a couple of different levels. And that's a 4-day program which will give you, a set of practical tools to work across all of our key markets: France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Britain, US, and Canada. And in there we'll have everything from insider tips in terms of how to crack that marketplace, how to flex and nuance your messaging and your product offering, your pricing, and a whole range of tools and advice then in terms of, getting your distribution strategy right, sales strategy right, and how to flex the various promotional platforms that we provide both in Ireland and overseas. And all of that comes together essentially with a program that is pretty extensive between here and the end of the year. We will support every sector, every region. There is something in there for every level, I suppose, within the business, and there is something that can be flexed, I suppose, as I say, right across the sectors. In terms of those web-based supports, just very quickly on those, we have created a bespoke section within the fáilteireland.ie website. It's sitting in under the industry support section. We're kind of labeling it Brexit Bites. It's a knowledge hub. So when you get there, there will be a range of practical supports and research insights, etc. And what we'll do is, as we get, I suppose, the clarity that Neil has referred to as negotiations go on, and we get some sense of what a long-term solution might look like here in Brexit, we'll continually update this section. We have other pieces of research in market at the moment, looking at particular market segments or niches that are worth going after. As we get the feedback from that and answer some of the so what questions on that, again, we'll be populating it into this section of the website to give you more fuel for thought. When you go to the site, one of the first banners you're hit with is an invitation to take a Brexit readiness test. So this is a short questionnaire that we've worked up in conjunction with Crowe Horwath. I should, I suppose, say straight off, it doesn't ask anybody to reveal the darkest secrets of their P&L. Okay, so it's just a set of reasonably probing questions about the kinds of initiatives and activities you're undertaking in your business across a range of issues. And having done that, it should take you about 15 minutes to do it. Once you've done it, what you get back is your own bespoke little report, which kind of says actually across the different areas, from a traffic light perspective, you're green, amber, or red, and actually then gives you some clues about if you want to be Brexit ready, then here are the kind of things that you need to do. And in that regard, we send you back to the Knowledge Hub. There are a range of tools already loaded up in there, so we have a lot of information on routes to market and how to flex by distribution channel. We have insider tips from the markets and cultural nuances. And again, I want to call out our colleagues in the Tourism Ireland market offices in that regard. We have an international sales toolkit, tactical pricing and contracting tips and advice. We have stuff on training workshops, and we have templates and checklists for you to use inside your business as you start to look at your plans for the year ahead. The other piece we have, which again you have a little card on your tables, is a little invitation to ask the expert. If you start to address this area, and you have particular questions that you want to ask in relation to the scorecard you get back, then you can, I suppose, contact us online, contact us by phone, or indeed at the end of the day today, if you want to chat to people out back, we're happy to engage in terms of how we can work with you and support you in terms of capability building. I said we wanted a holistic response, so the other piece of work we're doing is around the whole business development area. And I'm not going to labor this, but from our perspective, there are a range of initiatives we're looking at from a market retention perspective. So from our perspective, we're doing a lot of work at the moment in terms of the corporate golf area. So golf buyers, corporate companies, etc., making sure that that high net worth business from around the globe is protected, and we get a good chunk of that out of Britain. So from our perspective, we want to make sure that we remain competitive there. It's worth about 100 million annually to the economy. So from our perspective, we've got to be active on that. Niall alluded to it. We've had some of the key UK wholesalers in, showcasing to them fresh itineraries, and again, trying to keep them interested in the Irish marketplace. And again, critically, I suppose many of them will look for a first or last night in Dublin. I know for many of you, you may take a view that GB coach operator is not a rate that's appealing to you, but I think within the context of revenue management and a balanced mix, I suppose we'd say it's something that we'd encourage you to explore. The other area, I suppose, is the whole area of market diversification. And so we've got a number of pieces of work at the moment that are in market across, I suppose, top 10 markets globally. One is looking at the whole area of luxury travel. IPK would say globally it's worth about 172 billion. So from our perspective, we want to take a look at that marketplace, which markets are worth getting after, which distribution channels should we be active in, what does it mean in terms of the shaping of our product and service offering, etc., so that we can actually start to get after a piece of that pie. We're looking at the area of adventure and activity, and again, within the context of what we're trying to do with the Dublin brand, there's no reason why Dublin can't have a piece of that pie. Globally, it's worth about 260 billion. And we do have the products based on what we're getting back from research so far. So we've got to figure out how we sharpen our collective offering and get after it. Niall alluded earlier to the China Readiness Programme. So again, we now have the first of the direct flights confirmed, and if rumours are to be believed, we've got a couple of more in the wings that are likely to firm up early next year. So from our perspective, we'll hit about 65,000 to 70,000 Chinese visitors this year, and that number is growing significantly year on year. Now we have the direct access, I think we can be even more optimistic, but it has implications. It has implications in terms of, I suppose, cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity, and how we handle them on the shop floor. It has implications in terms of the culinary offering, and it has implications in terms of sales, marketing strategy, distribution strategy. We have a China Readiness Programme, which actually addresses all three issues. And we've run a pilot already, and the businesses that have been involved are kind of saying already, rather than the culinary piece being the hassle that they imagined it would be, it's actually delivering better gross profit than they'd anticipated, and for a lot less hassle than a traditional Irish cooked breakfast, etc. So again, it's something that would encourage people to engage with. And last but not least, Asia, biggest outbound, our fastest outbound market for golfers at this point in time. So from our perspective, doing a lot of work in that marketplace to try and make sure that we are positioning Ireland for growth in that context. So the last strand that I wanted to chat about, I suppose, is the whole area of marketing communications. And specifically here, I suppose we want to talk about our domestic marketing just now. We haven't really been active in the Northern Ireland marketplace with our domestic campaigns for the last number of years. We've relied instead on overspill from our existing channels. But for 2018, we're committing to put a minimum of 10% of our budget into the NI marketplace. I mean, that's particularly important, I think, to border counties. But I know from chatting to individual hoteliers here in Dublin, there are hoteliers in Dublin who are doing significant weekend business, etc., from the north. And so again, from our perspective, we want to make sure that we don't fall asleep at the wheel in terms of that Northern Ireland marketplace. We've got to be priming it. And I suppose the final bullet I had there is we will want you to work with us in that regard. When we're in campaign, we want you to be active as well in terms of putting offers into the domestic marketplace. So just in terms of a final slide for me in terms of some next steps, what I would encourage you to do, I suppose, is complete the Brexit readiness check, which will help highlight maybe some of the areas you may need to focus on. Use the online resources that are in place. Sign up for the other training supports, the capability and management development programs that we talked about, and help your business to prepare. Prepare for that which we know about, and in particular the competitiveness challenge. Prepare to diversify, because we need to do that. But equally, I think the best chance we have of dealing with the unknown stuff that Neil, I suppose, talked at length about is actually just run a business which is fit. And so if we can actually work with you in that regard, we would love to just make sure that we insulate ourselves as best as we can from whatever comes down the track in terms of Brexit.